Chief Executive John Lee says there will be no more isolation orders from January 30th. Hong Kong jobless rate falls further to 3.5%. New Zealand's Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern resigns. Good evening and welcome to TVB News. Speaking to lawmakers at the Legislative Council today, Chief Executive John Lee announced that COVID-19 patients will no longer be subject to mandatory isolation orders from January 30th. Christy Khan reports.
From January 30th, Hong Kong will take a major step forward to normalcy as the city will drop its mandatory isolation requirements for COVID-infected patients. They can choose whether to undergo quarantine on a voluntary basis. Speaking to lawmakers in a question and answer section, Chief Executive John Lee unveiled his decision this morning.
I
announce that I've decided to remove the isolation order.
Lee said COVID-19 will now be treated as an upper respiratory disease. He also emphasized that the removal of isolation order is a significant step towards normalcy, adding that his decision is based on various factors, including the very sound barrier of immunity that the city has developed.
This important step is based on scientific evidence and is risk-based. This is an inevitable step experienced by overseas countries and is one for Hong Kong. We have reached this stage.
In a press conference this afternoon, the authorities said they will issue a set of guidelines to COVID patients instead. For example, asymptomatic patients are free to go around in the community and can choose to go to work or not, but those with symptoms are advised to stay at home. People who are infected with COVID are eligible to take sick leave if they have medical certificates. Healthcare workers in residential care homes and students who come down with the virus should not go to their workplace or school until they test negative for the virus. Meanwhile, some services, including the Center for Health Protection's online reporting platform and service hotline for COVID-infected people, and the hospital authorities' remote consultation service, will be suspended from January 30th. And community isolation facilities will remain in operation until late February. Secretary for Health Lo Chung-Mau warned that the public should continue to treat COVID-19 as an issue of public health importance.
But I don't think we should just, because of the term endemic, regard this disease of lesser significance. The fact that it's still spreading in our community and the fact that it is affecting our high-risk group, such as the elderly and our young kids, and also the fact that it's affecting our healthcare system, means that we have to continue our fight against this disease.
Although the authorities have eased more anti-COVID measures, there's still no sign the mask mandate will be scrapped anytime soon. Christy Khan, TVB News.
During the Q&A at LegCo this morning, John Lee said Hong Kong has overcome the shadows of pandemic. He also announced plans to visit Guangdong for promotional work in the Greater Bay Area, as well as the Middle East to explore trade and business opportunities. Jacqueline with more.
Over the past 3 years under the COVID pandemic, the government rolled out multiple rounds of consumption voucher schemes and anti-epidemic funds in a bid to buoy the economy. In the Legislative Council's question and answer session for Chief Executive John Lee today, some lawmakers asked if the government has plans to minimize chances of budget deficits in the public coffers. Admitting that there are economic headwinds globally, Lee said he is confident about Hong Kong's outlook as the economic engine keeps running. He said there are more opportunities than difficulties, with the border reopening and concerted efforts across different sectors to seek possibilities. To reboot the city's tourism and economy, he said there would be a raft of international promotional campaigns for the SAR, including a Hello Hong Kong campaign. In the pipeline are sports and cultural mega events, as well as international conferences and exhibitions. In February, Li will lead a business delegation to Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates to improve cultural ties, explore business opportunities, and scout talent. There will be visits up north too. Li will meet senior officials in Guangdong to promote the development in the Greater Bay Area. Also on the agenda is his attendance at the Boao Forum in Hainan in March. Jackie Lin, TVB News.
The city reported 4,015 COVID cases today, ending a 12-day streak of daily infections numbering fewer than 4,000. As the Chinese New Year is just around the corner, many Hong Kongers have flocked to PCR test centres in order to get tested prior to visiting the mainland, resulting in long queues. Timothy Lee has more.
At 8 this morning, a long line of residents waiting for a swab could already be seen on Sham Shui Po's Maple Street, with the queue extending further as the hours went by. The COVID testing center, which was located within Maple Street Playground, was surrounded by over 100 people, including children and the elderly. This man, who bought a train ticket for the mainland, said the procedure was inconvenient and slow. This woman said when her relatives conducted PCR tests 2 days ago, they had to wait close to 4 hours.
Many residents could still be seen here at Maple Street Playground at around noon, with many people eager to get their PCR test results in order to cross the border to celebrate Chinese New Year with their families in the mainland. Local staff have increased their manpower in order to meet the escalating demand.
Elsewhere, the number of people queuing at some testing centers in neighboring areas, including Lai Kok Community Hall and Po Wan Road Playground, was far lower. The government said up to 50% of tested individuals in the past few days did not register online for their test, which led to the overstretching of services at some testing centers by 40%. Authorities remind residents to make prior online registrations and select less crowded testing centers. They will also periodically announce a list containing such testing centers via a government website. Meanwhile, 17 positive cases were reported from 14 care homes for the elderly and disabled. 299 infections were reported from 217 schools. Another 45 COVID patients have died, with the fifth wave having taken the lives of 12,797 people so far. Timothy Lee, TVB News.
The local unemployment rate decreased for the 8th consecutive month in the last quarter of 2022, according to information released today by the Census and Statistics Department. The unemployment rate fell from 3.7% from September to November 2022 to 3.5% from October to December. The decrease in unemployment was across most major sectors, such as retail, transportation and education. The underemployment rate fell from 1.6% in September to November 2022 to 1.5% in October to December. This was mainly seen in the decoration, repair and building maintenance sectors, as well as the food and beverage services and transportation sectors. Looking ahead, Secretary for Labour and Welfare Chris Sun said the labour market should continue to improve in the near term. The U.S. State Department said Secretary of State Antony Blinken is expected to visit Beijing next month. Authorities in Beijing noted that it is an important step towards reaching a consensus between the Chinese and U.S. sides.
I would expect that the Secretary will have an opportunity to travel to Beijing next month. The details of that visit are still being worked out. And I would imagine if and when Secretary Blinken does travel to Beijing, he will have an opportunity to meet with several interlocutors to discuss the broad array of issues that form the basis of what is arguably the most consequential bilateral relationship in the world.
New Zealand's Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern has resigned. She said she had no more in the tank to continue leading the country and would step down no later than early February. Tracy Furness has more.
Colleagues of New Zealand Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern applauded her after the visibly emotional Labour leader just minutes before announced she was stepping down in early February.
Today I'm announcing that I will not be seeking re-election and that my term as Prime Minister will conclude no later than the 7th of February. This has been the most fulfilling 5.5 years of my life, but it has also had its challenges. I know what this job takes, and I know that I no longer have enough in the tank to do it justice.
Reaction from across New Zealand was of shock and, for some, disappointment.
I don't believe it.
Why is that?
Because she said she'd never resign, and she's not the type of person that, well, to me anyway, that would give up on her country.
Well, I think she needs a break, to be honest. Yeah, she's done a lot.
So you don't sound that surprised?
Well, I don't think she was doing very well in the polls anyway, so, it's a good time for her to step down.
Ardern's empathetic leadership style was cemented by her response to the mass shootings at 2 mosques in Christchurch in 2019 that killed 51 people. She was respected across the political spectrum for her handling of the COVID-19 pandemic, which saw the country face some of the strictest measures globally, but also resulted in one of the lowest death tolls. Ardern has served as the country's 40th Prime Minister. A Labour vote for the new leader will take place on Sunday. The elected leader will be Prime Minister until the next general election, which will be held on October 14th. Tracy Furness, TVB News.
Still ahead on tonight's news. Plans for developing Chulan Zone 137 announced. More treasures have arrived at the Palace Museum. Lunar New Year greetings from United Nations Secretary General. Welcome back to TVB News. The government unveiled more details on the development of Area 137 in Chulan. Jacqueline reports.
The development project for Area 137 proposed in the previous policy address is poised to generate some 50,000 residential units, catering to a population of 135,000. Today, the government ironed out more details of the plans at the Legislative Council. Reclamation work will be undertaken in the water south of Lohas Park, yielding around 20 hectares of land. That ratchets up the area of land for development in the district to around 100 hectares in total. 2 hectares of land will be reclaimed off the coast of the Innovation Park there. That small parcel of land will facilitate the construction of the Chulan South Extension Line. Reclamation and slope cutting works will be undertaken too for another district under the plan, Area 132. 25 hectares of land will be reclaimed to make way to relocate 2 public facilities from Area 137 to Area 132, including a cement factory. It will also house 4 new facilities for power supply as well as the transfer of waste and refuse. They are located 1 kilometer away from the nearest housing estate. Authorities say that's 200 meters further away from their originally planned locations. Some Chulan residents say what matters is if these stations will affect the air quality in the district. This resident meanwhile felt disappointed about land reclamation work as he can't swim in the seas there anymore. The first batch of more than 12,000 flats in Area 137 will be ready for move-ins in 2030 at the earliest. Jacqueline, TVB News.
Starting today, a new batch of loan exhibits from Beijing's Palace Museum, as well as items related to the Lunar New Year, are on display in the Hong Kong Palace Museum. Visitors shared with us what they thought about the pieces.
A hanging panel with favourable items, a vase that stands for peace, and rams that symbolise good fortune. A pair of gourd-shaped hangings with auspicious characters, and a pair of elephants that manifest protection and blessings. These are just some of the many treasures that the emperors and empresses surrounded themselves with during the Lunar New Year at the Forbidden City in Beijing hundreds of years ago. Among them, 17 are Grade 1 of China's national cultural relics.
Having hot pots in winter is not just a trend in modern times. Fun fact, the Qianlong Emperor had 200 meals with hot pot in 1789 alone. The question is, how do we know about that detail?
Chulan Emperor is probably the world's best documented ruler on Earth in human history. So pretty much you can detect so much about details and textures of his life on a daily basis. For example, if you want to know what he's eating on a daily basis, they have an imperial menu documenting in great detail.
This tourist from London who's visiting Hong Kong for the first time is impressed by the exhibits.
There's a lot of different stuff that I've not seen elsewhere. I've heard lots of good reviews about it. You know, it's people say this is where you come to learn about the culture and the history, and I think that's really important when you're visiting a new city. So interesting. There's just so much depth to it, and the items are so beautiful, and you can tell that there was time that was put into the craftsmanship.
A visiting scholar also shared his views.
The clothing was very impressive. I also thought the ceramics were marvelous. The portraits of the emperors and the empresses were really interesting too. I think the design of the museum is something I haven't seen before. The way that it's laid out, it seems quite innovative architecturally.
For now, the museum can accommodate about 5,000 to 6,000 visitors per day. But with cross-border travel resumed, operators say the cap on the daily number of visitors entering the museum may be adjusted.
Cathay Pacific Airways Flight Attendants Union began a work to rule today, whereby workers refuse to do any work that is not strictly required of their job as a form of protest. The Cathay Union called upon the airline's employees to avoid working overtime today, as well as not to come to work if it is their day off. The union said the airline is running on a shortage of manpower, as Cathay Pacific decided to slash one staff member per flight, placing more burden on their workload. In the UK, Prime Minister Rishi Sunak said there is an abuse of power in the police when commenting on the case involving a serving London police officer who admitted carrying out 24 counts of rape. Daniel Rell tells us more.
The revelation that a police officer has admitted raping many women over decades has shocked Britain, especially after reports emerged that the police had received ample warning about his conduct but still failed to stop him. Speaking after visiting Bexley Heath Police Station in London, British Prime Minister Rishi Sunak said the abuse of power within the London Metropolitan Police Force needed to be addressed promptly.
That the abuse of power that we've seen this week is absolutely despicable and it needs to be addressed immediately. Now, that's why all police forces across the country have been told to check all of their serving officers and staff against national police databases to identify and root out anybody who shouldn't be serving.
London's Metropolitan Police was plunged into a new crisis after 48-year-old David Carrick admitted carrying out 24 counts of rape over almost 2 decades while serving as a police officer, and his colleagues missed multiple chances to stop him. The force's responsibilities include leading the country's response to terrorism. Meanwhile, opposition Labour leader Keir Starmer criticised Rishi Sunak over ambulance waiting times during Prime Minister's questions at Westminster, prompting a rebuke from Sunak.
Mr. Speaker, over the 40 minutes or so that these sessions tend to last, 700 people will call an ambulance. 2 will be reporting a heart attack. 4 will be reporting a stroke. But instead of the rapid help they need, many will wait and wait and wait. So if he won't answer any questions, will he at least apologise for the lethal chaos under his watch?
Mr. Speaker, it's absolutely right that people can rely on the emergency services when they need them, and that's why we're rapidly implementing measures to improve the delivery of ambulance times and indeed urgent and emergency care.
People with emergencies waited more than 90 minutes on average for an ambulance at the end of 2022. The pressure has been compounded by nurses and ambulance workers holding strikes over pay and conditions. Dan Orell, TVB News.
Footage from Ukraine has emerged that a building on fire following a fatal helicopter crash that killed 14 people, including the Ukrainian Interior Minister. The video is believed to be from a location close to Kiev in Ukraine. Ukrainian Interior Minister Denis Monatyrsky was the most senior Ukrainian official to die since the war began with a Russian invasion in February last year. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said the head of Ukraine's national police will be temporarily in charge of the Ministry of Internal Affairs. When addressing the World Economic Forum in Davos, Switzerland, by video link, he did not directly blame Russia for the incident. Meanwhile, the International Atomic Energy Agency will install teams of experts at all of Ukraine's nuclear power plants to reduce the risk of severe accidents. United Nations Secretary-General Antonio Guterres has extended Lunar New Year greetings to the Chinese people. He expressed thanks to China for its strong partnership with the UN and support for international cooperation.
Chun Jie Guai Le.
I'm pleased to send my warmest greetings as we enter the year of the rabbit. The rabbit is a symbol of energy and dexterity. These are qualities we need as humanity faces hardship and tests. I thank China for your strong partnership with the United Nations.
Guterres added that by working together as a global community, it is possible to advance peace and achieve sustainable development. The Spring Festival, which is another name for the Chinese Lunar New Year, falls on January 22nd this coming Sunday. An attempt to build the world's largest pizza has got underway in Los Angeles in the U.S.
Yeah, so it's a big team, as you can see. Look at the size of it. It's a giant pizza. It's about 14,000 square feet. So if you think about that, it's going to be like 68,000 slices of pizza when we're all done.
To make the pizza, rectangular slices of dough are being laid along the base of the venue. Pizza sauce is then painted onto the dough before cheese and pepperoni are added. A total of 13,653 pounds of dough, 4,948 pounds of pizza sauce, over 8,800 pounds of cheese and roughly 630,496 regular and cupped pepperoni will be used to make the pizza. That's the news. Thanks for watching.